Hello again.
Hello.
Welcome back for part 7. So, a few things have been happening. Number one, I want us to cross the finish line at the same time, or pretty close to it. I didn't know how long this was going to take, and so we're kind of finding out in real time. And so, what's happening is my painting's at a point where I either need to stop working on it and give you a chance to catch up a little bit, or pull way ahead, kind of like on a hiking trail. And I don't want to get so far up the trail that you lose sight of me. So if you're okay with it, we'll let today be a day for you to close the gap a little bit. And so what I'll do is I'll start working on a different painting. I'll still be here for you to ask questions of, if you wish. Mm-hmm. And my painting is right where you can see it, and use it as a guide if you wish. But that's my plan for today. And that works out well, because giving an extra few days for the underpainting to keep stiffening up before we put a flesh tint on it, that'll be good for it. We could probably get away with putting it on today, but waiting until the next session would be better still. We talked about it before we turned on the camera. I'm glad you're okay with this, because I didn't want to make you feel bad or leave you feeling self-conscious. For those who are just picking up in this series, it's like Amanda has never painted with oil paints before. And she's done some paintings and lots of drawings and some paintings of people, but this is her first portrait like this, isn't that right? Mm-hmm. The first time working this way. And so this is kind of the difference between, I said before to you, the difference between you and me is 300 of these things. I've been doing this for 20 years and done around 300 portraits. And that's the main difference. Now, something you don't know is that some people have started watching this video series mm-hmm. and making comments to me.
Oh.
And many of them are expressing how impressed they are with what you are doing. They're just really impressed and really amazed, because this is your first time doing this stuff. I'm impressed too. Mm-hmm. But it's kind of funny, because they're like, wow, she's doing so well. I'm so impressed. And then they pause for a moment. Yours is good too, they say to me. Which is fine, which is fair, because when you've been doing something for 20 years, people kind of expect you to be at a certain level of proficiency. But it's been kind of fun. So you are doing very well. But this is the funny thing with compliments. We can't make you believe it. Mm-hmm. And that's why I wanted to, check with you before you started rolling the camera, because I don't want you to feel put on the spot or ambushed or self-conscious. But another interesting thing's been happening. We've been filming these sessions, and I've been editing together the videos, and it's been a little bit like watching back game footage to see what you actually did. What was the game plan versus what actually happened. Mm. And this is another reason I've called this series an experiment in teaching, because I haven't really taken on students before. I've bumped into teaching over the years, but I've never really pursued it. And so I had a preconception of what this would be like. We make a painting at the same time, you follow along, you do what I do, even if you don't understand why I'm doing it. And maybe that was naive on my part, because I'm watching back the footage, and it looks to me as if you seem to be asking very few questions, and you're just diligently working away, doing your thing. And you also seem to be looking at what I'm doing very little. You seem to be very focused on what you are doing, which is fine, which is fair. You're engaged in whatever your process is and whatever is happening between you and this painting. And maybe I should have foreseen that, because that's actually what's happening when I'm painting. So that's not a criticism. It's just an observation between the expectation and reality. It's like, interesting. This is what I thought would happen. This is what's actually happening. And so that's kind of cool. So for today, in catching up, I'm going to suggest that you give the cloak a rest for a minute. I think you still, okay, from the last time, what I said was you're getting some very nice microform. All these shapes are starting to feel very nice and volumetric. But as a whole, as a garment hanging off of a human body, it's starting to feel a bit flat. You're losing some of the macro form. I'm going to suggest that you kind of give the cloak a rest for a minute, because I've also noticed that as you're working, you mix nearly every load of paint in the brush. It's like I make up piles of a single color that I'm going to work with, and I just use that everywhere that I have predetermined to use it, and then I mix up the next color, and I do some tweaking in between. But you are very studiously mixing every brush mark and loading the brush a lot. And so you're developing some habits that are very different from mine. Part of what that's going to do is you're getting thicker layers of paint than I get, at least in a single session, which means it's probably a bit softer than mine is. Mine's stiff and probably a bit more stiff than yours, which means putting more layers of new paint on it. There's a funny in-between stage with the curing of oil paints. You can work wet into wet, and you can do all sorts of things while it's still nice and soft, and introduce new wet paint and move things around to get some very nice effects. You can also put wet onto dry and get a whole other range of effects. But if you put wet onto the in-between cured stage, you can rub paint off the paint you've already put down as you're putting on new paint. And so you end up in kind of a losing tug of war between what you did before and like and want to keep versus what you're introducing now. So maybe today's a good day to just leave the cloak alone for a bit and work on the background. But this will also help the cloak. See, what I'm doing in mine is just a very abstract background, right? But it's not nothing. So I'm not creating an image, a setting, an imagistic setting of where he is. It's just kind of an abstract background, but it still needs to feel like atmosphere. And what that translates to is kind of a conversation between the edges. So the figure's got edges, and the background is a space, right? Down here in the shadows, the darkness of the cloak and the background are getting very blurred together. And as it goes up, it starts to get a little more contrasty, a little more distinct, until I get to moments like this, where there's a very clear distinction between the cloak and the background. And then it gets a little fuzzier here again. And over here, it's very soft and blended between the background and the cloak. And then it's got this little moment of some light in the background, and you get a sharper edge, and then it blurs again. That's what I mean by the conversation. We want to create a dialogue between the background and the foreground so that it feels like a body in space. There's atmosphere, there's space, there's ether, all of those things. And so as you work on your background, even though you're taking a break from working on the cloak, you're still kind of working on the cloak, because you're working on that conversation between background, foreground, figure, and atmosphere.